All right, I'll go ahead and get started this evening. And we will move ahead to the quiet zone study from Jacob. Are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
I usually do. You guys usually look at me like I'm weird because I do.
Can everybody hear me?
Tell you work no matter what, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We can hear.
All right. I will see if I can screen share here, or if, Annette, do you have a copy of the presentation, a chance?
I put it on the.
Yeah, we have it available on Board Docs on our website.
Okay, perfect.
I can see a TV on the wall there, Jacob, so they see it too, so we can probably share it.
I can't, the host has disabled screen sharing.
Oh,
Otherwise I
okay.
would share it.
Otherwise, we can just walk them through the slides and then.
We'll just walk through the slides. I don't see Chandra in the audience, so I'll just let Brian start here real quick.
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and pull it up.
Perfect.
Okay. Chandra's not there, is that correct, Annette?
He's not, no.
Okay.
Is it just this one?
The
Okay.
third document's up.
It's the third.
PowerPoint,
Oh,
Yep.
thank you.
right corner.
Downloading it.
Just want to start with a little introduction here, Brian, while they're pulling it up.
Yeah, so I guess, first of all, thanks for inviting us to attend the council meeting tonight. It was a little bit short notice, otherwise we would have tried to attend in person, but this will work just fine though. So talking to Annette and Jacob and Chandra, sounds like a lot of the councils somewhat familiar with the study. I believe you got one new council member. It's kind of coming into it green. So we're just going to give a kind of high level update to the study, try to explain what a quiet zone is for those that don't even really fully understand what it is. And then kind of give some recommendations on what improvements we think should be installed, to make sure that you're in support of the project. And one of the goals that Chandra is trying to do with DMATs is reaching out to all the different communities to gauge their interest with moving forward with the study and applying for it's called a CRISI grant, which is a federal rail grant, basically as a team. So I'll get into that a little bit further into the presentation, but I guess before we jump into the presentation, I'm Brian Jansen. I'm the project manager with this that's kind of leading the study. Jacob Sprengler is also on the call. Jacob's been doing a lot of heavy lifting with drafting the report. There's a lot of time that's involved just with reaching out to all the different members, and the same thing with the railroads, I should say. In Piasta, we only got 2 crossings, but we're looking at 30 total crossings, and we got like 3 railroads, 2 states. It's 4 different municipalities, counties. So there's just a lot of people to coordinate with. So Jacob, if you want to go ahead and dive into the presentation, I'll let you kind of take it away from there.
Yeah, so I'll just jump to slide 3. As at a high level, we just kind of want to explain when we say quiet zone, we're kind of basically talking about the fact that the federal law says that trains have to use their horns when they approach a highway crossing, the public highway crossing. There is one exception that the federal laws allow for that not to occur. And at locations that are exempt from that federal law, we call that the quiet zone, whether it's a single crossing or a group of crossings in a row. So that's all we kind of mean by that when we say that. And we're going to kind of stipulate that that applies to public crossings. So we've got different types of crossings. You got your highway crossings like Piasta Street. You could have like a dedicated pedestrian crossing, or a vulnerable road user crossing that's like a trail or something like that. Then you've got private crossings that aren't used by the public. So when we talk about the requirement to use your horns, we're talking about public crossings. We're going to jump ahead to the next slide, and on slide 4 there, we just want to basically say by taking away the horns, basically the exception to the federal rule says if you're going to take away the horns, you have to complete additional safety measures in order to take that risk that you just raised by taking away the horn warning and offset that and bring it back down. So basically, in a nutshell, what we have to do is improve safety of that crossing to offset that. How do we do that? Well, there's quite a bit of flexibility in that law for public authorities. And basically the difference between these two paths is, one, it doesn't require you to apply to the FRA or anybody. The law says if you meet these requirements, you just send out a letter and you go ahead and tell the railroads that they need to stop using the horns, and that's enforceable. Or another method is, depending on how you choose to go about it, would be you do different combinations of things that would require you to ask permission from the FRA, and they would have to review it and agree to it. So we'll kind of talk about a little bit the difference between it. The one where you don't need to apply to them, basically, you're going to do pre-approved measures that they've already said and they know that works. And you can do it that way, or we know that there's some tricky scenarios that might not always work. So you might use something that's not pre-approved, in which case they're going to want to review it for you and take a peek at it. Everything that we're going to talk about in the report assumes that you're going to do it without needing approval from the FRA, because that's quite a lengthy process and involves a lot more studies. And I don't think we need to get into that in Piasta. I think we're in pretty good shape. So I'll jump ahead to the next slide now on slide 5. And you can kind of see on there, basically, the federal government has run a model, and based on the number of trains going across the crossing, the number of cars going across it, the speed of trains, and different things like that go into this model that they put up together, and they come out and they spit out what they call a risk number. So each crossing is going to have some number associated with it that takes all those factors into account. And this is the way that they put a number to it that allows them to quantify what that risk is. So if you've got a single crossing, you just take the risk of that crossing, or if in this case we're talking about 2 crossings, you would take the average risk of both of them combined. And we're talking about that total risk. So in this case, we're talking about 2 crossings, Piasta Street and Cox Springs Road, which is right on the edge of the city limits there. And you can see on the table, I've put what those numbers are. Basically a baseline risk of 19,500 and 6,800 as it would stand today. So those would be the numbers if we talk about risk. And you can see the table to the right, we talked about how our goal is to reduce that risk number. Well, the government has provided a couple thresholds that say you need to reduce risk below a couple of these thresholds to make that work. And on the far right side of the screen, you can see one of those current numbers is 15.5. is what the government has established for that threshold for one of them. And that doesn't depend on any quiet zone. That's just a national number. And then there's another metric that they use that depends on what crossings you're using, but we won't delve too deeply into that. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to have to improve the crossings with a minimum amount of improvements that we'll talk about here shortly. And then we have to do a little bit more to decrease that. So you can see here, if we were to install the absolute minimum improvements to qualify for a quiet zone, your numbers would be 19.5, and then Cox Spring would be 6,800 without any above and beyonds. So we'll jump ahead again to slide 6 here. And basically what we're looking at here is there's a list of about 5 improvements that the government has pre-approved and said, we've studied this, and these are tried and true methods. If you install these, no questions asked, you go ahead and install these, that's no problem. You just tell us you did it and you're good to go. So those things kind of include a temporary closure or a permanent closure or a grade separation. So that basically eliminates all risk because there's no more crossing there. You can put a 4-quadrant gate system in, or you can, which basically means there's going to be a gate on all sides, and we'll kind of show you some pictures of these. You got 2 quad gate systems, with some additional things in the middle of the road. And then you can do a couple other things like one-way conversions and things of that nature. Anything that's not on that list of 5, if you decide to do something else there, you have to basically do an engineering study that can prove this is why it's going to be reduced, the risk is going to be reduced. And that's where he talked about you're going to have to apply to the FRA. So we're going to try to avoid that at all costs. So when we say minimum improvements, just to be considered for a quiet zone, to start with as a baseline, you're going to have 2 quadrant gates out there. So you can see in this picture here, we've got And this would be slide 7, my bad. On slide 7, we've got a picture of a gate system here. We've got 2 gates, one on each approach lane. So every time a car comes up to that crossing, they get stopped by that gate. You've got circuitry inside the track that doesn't matter how fast the train's coming, it's going to tell the signal 20 seconds before that train gets there, no matter how fast the train's going. You need that kind of circuitry in the tracks, and then a couple other little things on those. So just for starters, you're going to make all those improvements to it. And then if you go to the next slide, please. On slide 8, these are some of examples of the above and beyond things you can do. This would be example of your 4-quad gate. So it's basically the same thing as that 2-quadrant, but now you see we've got 2 more gates. So it doesn't matter if you're entering or leaving, cars cannot get into that crossing when a train's going through because there's gate arms. Next slide, on slide 9, please. Here we get an example of a 2-quadrant system with physical barriers in the middle of the road. So basically, when you come up to that signal, you're trapped in between a whole bunch of things to prevent you from driving around the gate. So you have 2 options here. You can put like a channelization device in there, we're showing on the left side of the slide, or you can put in a permanent median. And I can tell you from talking to every single city that we approached in the area that's done one of these, they would not recommend you put in the channelizing devices. They say it's a maintenance nightmare and it's really easy to become non-compliant. So we highly suggest to go the median route when we're talking about these kind of things. And then on slide 10, please. This would be an example of one of those non-roadway crossings that are a little bit unique. So if you got a pedestrian or a trail crossing, you can see we've got a couple examples of what improvements might look like for those if we were to think about trails in the future, things like that. You can see we've got channelization fencing so that we can control where they're crossing, and you can see we've got some Z gates and things like that that require the pedestrians to look both ways before they even cross the tracks. And those pictures are from Hiawatha, and then the 2 on the right are actually from Muscatine. So those are all local examples of other communities in the area and what they've done. Next slide, please. So that's just a little bit of a background on overall quiet zones when we're talking about it. Now we kind of want to show you how we're applying that. Basically, we're in the middle of the study, and our goal was to say, how can we apply these federal regulations to these communities in Piasta? How can we best apply these and create a plan for the cities and recommend the appropriate way to proceed to designate one of these quiet zones? So that's what we've kind of done through this report. We basically started by kind of identifying what crossings we needed to look at and where, and then we kind of went and threw some concepts together and said, what's possible here? And we ran some of those risk numbers, and we actually went out to the site with the railroads already back last April, all the railroads, Federal Railroad Administration, and the state rail departments, and actually looked at each crossing and diagnostically reviewed all of them for general concurrence. So we've already done on-site reviews at all these locations that have gone into these recommendations that we provided. So I want to go ahead and jump forward to slide 12, please. You can see here's our overall map of all the crossings we've actually studied. So this is quite a large study, and the 2 in Piasta are on the far left, bottom left side of that picture. And we're looking at Piasta Street and Cox Springs Road, which are both on the line that's currently operated by Canadian National Railroad. Next slide, please. In this case, we'll talk a little bit about some of those federal requirements. We won't get too far into them, but just know that there's certain requirements that, trains have to use their horns so far in advance of a crossing. So there's going to be a requirement that says you're going to have closely spaced crossings all included at the same time. But if they're far enough apart, you can kind of treat them almost more individually or do them at different times. Just know that there are requirements that say for a quiet zone, you have to have a certain separation between crossings, or otherwise you have to do them both at the same time type deal. So as we get in kind of that, just kind of be aware that's just part of the background requirements there. If we've got a private crossing that's outside of a quarter mile away from any public crossings, which we don't have in Piasta, they would be ineligible for inclusion because this only applies to public crossings. Next slide, please. We'll just focus on Piasta Street for you right now. We just want to take you real quick through our thought process on how this all worked. So here on slide 14, you kind of see Piasta Street, what we were looking at. We went out there and assessed the site conditions. We've got no crossings or side streets within 100 feet on the south side. And we've got a commercial access point on the north side, and we've also got a pedestrian crossing there really close to the crossing. So those are all things that we need to kind of keep in mind when we're looking at the safety of this crossing. So now we took that and kind of applied these 4 or 5 different pre-approved methods and said, which one is most appropriate? Well, this is one of the main crossings, if not the only one, actually in Piasta at the moment. So it doesn't really make sense to close it or convert it to one way, because that would make a mess of the overall connectivity for the city. Grade separation would be an expensive option, but we just spent money to repair that road, as Annette was talking to us about earlier this year. The 4-quadrant upgrade could work, but might not be the best option, because we went out there and found that the signals that are out there are already meeting the minimum requirements for a quiet zone. So they're in pretty good shape, and it might be more cost effective just to put medians on there. So you can kind of see we're looking at those medians, and the minimum requirements for those medians would be extending those 100 feet away from the crossing. Unless you've got a commercial access on the north side, you're allowed to go down to 60, but no less than 60 feet. So in this case, we think that, you know, the medians might be a really good option and a really cost-efficient option for the city in this case to designate that quiet zone. So in this case, we might identify that median as the most appropriate option for a recommendation. Let's skip forward 2 slides, please, to slide 16. Now, we wanted to kind of point out that we recommend working with the county on this, considering Cox Springs Road is so close to the boundary of your city, and more than likely a lot of those residents are still dealing with horns for that crossing as well in some fashion. And we realize that maybe in the future there's possibility that the city might expand and annex more of that portion of the roadway in. So we figured it would be in their best interest to work with the county and maybe go on joint for this quiet zone, at least in the long run, if not the near term. So we ran similar situations down at that crossing. And we determined, since these crossings are a good distance away, you don't have to do them both right now. We realized that there might be changes coming up by Cox Springs Road, and there's really no signal equipment up there at the moment. So we realized that it might not make sense to go and put a lot of money into that crossing when it might change with future trail plans and things like that. And that's okay, because right now they're in 2 separate jurisdictions and they're separated by a good distance. So you can see on the slide here, 16, what we did next is we kind of basically put together 3 or 4 options for every location. These are not the only 4 options that can be built. These are just a representative option from one of the most expensive options and resilient options all the way down to the absolute bare minimum what you could do. So when we went through these options, we're looking at things such as safety. You know, what safety concerns exist there, even not considering a quiet zone? Is there things that need to happen even if we're not even pursuing a quiet zone? We're going to evaluate the feasibility of what locations make the most sense to improve, and how can we get the greatest risk reduction in the quiet zone. Then we're going to evaluate susceptibility. Hey, if we throw out channelizers there, how likely are they to get run over by snow plows and things like that? Hey, should we look at, you know, medians, things like that? How can we reduce their risk enough to make sure that if traffic increases or if train increases, that risk number doesn't rise above these thresholds in the future? And then lastly, obviously, we want to evaluate cost. What's going to give us the most risk reduction for the least amount of cost for you? So you can kind of see an example of those 4 options we've provided on the right side. And in this case, we ended up looking at option A as a really good option, because more or less for Piasta, we're not looking at a significant price difference between those crossings. And similarly for Dubuque County, if we've got time to plan for that other Cox Springs, we might as well build it into that program now. So we're kind of seeing most of that cost of that system is really tied into your signal equipment. And since Piasta Street's in good shape, that's actually a lot easier to work with and get that into a quiet zone. So if you want to go ahead to slide 17. So here we go. On the report, basically, we put together a little bit of a table that kind of summarizes what improvements we will recommend. And for the quiet zone in Piasta, you can see the 2 crossings. Basically, we're looking at recommending medians on Piasta Street, since all the other equipment's in good shape and it really wouldn't involve any work on private property. And we're looking at that. If you want a quiet zone, you could do that in the next month and put those medians in, and we'd be in really good shape. So there's not a whole lot of time required there either. Cox Springs Road, of course, just because of how many questions might be up there yet and its future is a little bit in question, we recommend that maybe since that's so far away, we just wait on that one and see when it develops. Or if the plans come to fruition and get scheduled, we recommend that maybe we wait on that one until we get a better idea of what's coming down the road. So that kind of summarizes what we've been looking at for the two Piasta crossings. Next slide, please. I'm going to kind of wrap up my portion of it and let Brian and Chandra talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing with grant opportunities. But I just wanted to point out, we've been presenting to all the other boards and councils in the area with a similar presentation. We're going out and looking at public input for affected private properties along these tracks, so we can kind of build that into our recommendations. We'll take that information and maybe in February timeframe, we'll build that into our final recommendations and document that in the report, and we'll submit that final report to DMATS, and he will disseminate that to our member entities. And then from there, as a kind of aside, we'll be working on those grant opportunities that they're going to talk about in a minute, and we'll be able to basically take both of those, figure out what improvements you want to make, and we'll be able to move forward with that with the next steps. And that would kind of be, a couple notices. We talked about the federal regulations might require you to send a letter to the railroad, for instance, if you want to proceed, and we can work on that down the road. But just wanted to let you know our next couple steps over the next month, we'll be finishing up the public input and getting that final draft out to you. So I'll pass it back to Brian here quick in conjunction with Chandra to kind of talk about some funding efforts that are currently ongoing.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. So it looks like we're getting a little short on time. So I'm just going to kind of highlight this Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements Program. So it's CRISI is what it's called. It's a federal program from the years of FY22 to FY26. They've allocated $10 billion. So you're going to be you would be competing against communities all across the U.S. Historically, based on like projects that were awarded last year, it's typically larger projects in like the several $1 million range. I don't know what your odds would be if you were to, if the city of Piasta were to go after something like that by themselves. So that's where Chandra is suggesting basically all the communities, all the members that are part of this quiet zone study that are actually interested in installing some of these safety improvements, that they team as a group and basically go after this grant and write one application, basically be one big project. So that's kind of what Chandra is looking for. He's just trying to gauge some interest to see if like the city of Piasta is in support of it, and if you want to jump on the train essentially and go after this as one group. So there is going to be a cost associated with that. So Chandra has I think the city of Dubuque uses a grant writer out of DC. They've been pretty successful on some of these large federal grants. I think the plan is to use that same grant writer. He's reached out to us to help out with that application. There's some technical stuff with the cost benefit analysis that's kind of related to our study that we could help prepare. But beyond that, it's your typical federal grant application, which can get pretty lengthy and kind of complicated. The other two grants that are on here, I'm not going to get into too much detail. The third one is a grant that's kind of administered through the DOT. We've already been told that if they're aware we're pursuing a quiet zone, we don't have a good chance of getting a grant through that program. You'd have to basically approach it from an angle of, we're not going to do a quiet zone. We're only pursuing the feasibility of a quiet zone. But tonight, we're mostly just trying to gauge interest on that first Chrissy grant that we have listed.
Leonard, do you want to?
So I think Anderson Bogart could cover pretty much. So a couple of things here. We as an MPO will be recommending city not inform the FRA for a quiet zone. Once you inform, you're on your own. It means that you can't apply for Iowa DOT funding. So our recommendation is right now you treat these improvements as safety improvements. And then go for grants with Iowa DOT. And then once you get the grants, improve, do your safety and all that, then go to FRA and say we want to do a quiet zone. If you're doing safety improvements, you will get more support from the railroads because obviously you're installing equipment, which they should do with their own money, which you're trying to get federal money. That'll help them a lot. So Brian and Jacob, they are lining up meetings with CNCP and BNS. So we'll be inviting you guys to those meetings. So at that meeting, you can propose that this is what you want to do with the Piasta crossing and see what their take is. If they say, yeah, they are interested, my recommendation is push for the 20% match, which it's pretty bleak. I don't think we'll have a chance, but those are railroads. But there's no harm in asking. So ask for the 20%. If they are able to give you 20% and you're able to get federal aid for 80%, you got a federal job freely done. And then from there on, we can decide if you want to go with the quiet zone or not.
And then again, I just wanted to call out the one that we're recommending here is not actually going to be impacting that particular traffic or railroad signal equipment at Piasta Street. So in this case, we'll be working with CN, but if we don't have to get any equipment from CN, it might just be the cost of those medians at that particular location. So this one might be one location where we're not necessarily looking at have to upgrade that equipment, but the railroad might say, it's a couple years old and there's newer stuff out there and maybe we can upgrade it anyway, but you wouldn't have to necessarily. But if Chandra, if you're wrapped up and if there's any questions for us, feel free to go ahead and fire away.
So our two crossings are far enough apart that we don't have to do them at the same time. That's what I'm saying, Jacob.
Correct. The two crossings, Cox Springs Road and Piasta and Cox Springs. I don't know exactly what conversations have gone on between the county and the city on it, but right now my understanding is they're in two separate jurisdictions. So if you guys wanted to proceed with your crossing right now, you would not need to wait for Cox Springs Road.
And I'm a little confused on the grant thing. If we go in and on the Chrissy grant with the whole group, right, with the whole region, which is what you're suggesting, right? We contributed the cost for that. If there is a grant received, is the idea we'll prorate it across the crossings, the 30 that are in there, or the jurisdictions, or how would that work?
That's one thing. We'll be working with the city for your two crossings. We'll be asking, there are 4 or 5 scenarios what Anderson Bogart is providing. You can choose a scenario where you want to implement. I know everyone wants to go with scenario A, the topmost, but keep in mind the topmost might cost you more in the long run because there's maintenance with the railroads. So look at all the scenarios and say, hey, we want to go with B, which might be 200,000, or you want to go with C. Or you might say, hey, I got everything here. I don't need to do anything, so I'll go with D, where I don't need to do much. So you as a city will decide what you want to do for your crossings. And that's what we'll apply. If you get funded, that's the amount you'll get for your crossing.
As I understand it, the Piasta Street crossing, we can't qualify as a quiet zone there without adding the medians.
Right.
Right.
Based on, if you were to go to slide 16 and look at that, technically speaking, I believe the risk of that crossing, let's see where I had those numbers posted here.
That was further up on slide 5, wasn't it?
Yeah, so slide 5, Piasta Street baseline with the 19,000, you are correct. That you would need, if you were to do that crossing on your own as its own intersection, you would have to install medians. If you did it at the same time with Cox Springs and you put signals in there, you would not need to do anything, but that would require Cox Springs to go at the same time and also get improved. So on your own, yes, you're looking at medians to move that forward individually.
So what, obviously, it's the cost of writing this grant. What is our proportion to, like, to
So
$1,300
right
or
now, the way the proposal is, we have 28 crossings, you know. But each jurisdiction can decide how many crossings they want as part of the grant. City of Dubuque, they got 11 crossings, they might say, no, we want to go with only 6, you know. East Dubuque, we got 5, and they might say, we just want to go with 3. Overall, basing on number of crossings we get, we will then prorate to each member. So right now, it's more like an estimate with 28 crossings, but once the cities decide how many crossings they want to go with, then we'll get a final number.
So in our admin notes and that, you have 1,428, that's based on everybody in all 30 crossings wanting to participate?
That's right.
Okay,
If that's what I typed in there, yes. Let's see it right now.
1,428,
So that would be our part to help.
that'd be our part to help unless,
Pay for the grant to be written.
unless some of the other jurisdictions pull certain crossings out, then there's
Correct,
fewer
then our costs will
crossings,
go up.
then our costs will go up. And we might choose to just put Piazza Street in it and not.
Well, I think with county, we have a meeting, we're working on getting scheduled to discuss, to start those discussions with them if they want to do a joint together. I don't know what's gonna become of that meeting at this point, but I don't see them doing any improvements to that crossing. Do you, Chandra?
No, we gave the recommendations, we are doing the same thing with them, we are proposing prices, they can decide. So right now, we didn't get anything from them.
When does the application need to be in, Chandra?
So we are expecting the feds to announce the grant, release the grant in middle of submit. So by like last of week of Jan, we'll have a clear understanding who wants to go for what, then we'll have an estimate. The grant writers need at least a month to write the grant. So by end of January, you'll get real numbers from us.
Okay, so you're looking for an answer from us by the end of January.
So. yeah.
Jacob, one more question. So your assessment of the Piazza Street crossing, we have enough room in the roadway as it exists now to put the medians in? Or do we have to expand the roadway, the width?
Well, I would anticipate based on the approximate width that we've established that you could fit that median in with pretty minor intrusions, especially since you just resurfaced that road. I think it would be pretty easy to cut those in without having to widen it or anything like that, so.
Yeah, we would generally look at a minimum 3-foot wide median. So that'd include the width of the curbs too. So you'd have like a 2-foot brick insert essentially within those curbs.
And then I guess I would just add, we talked about kind of in the report and we've talked about with other entities, there's certain locations that we would call slam dunks as far as, implementing a quiet zone goes. And I think out of a lot of them that we're dealing with in this area, you guys have got quite an ideal location here to basically not have to work on the railroad equipment and put those medians in. So I think you guys are in very good shape here. And this is one location where you see there's an option later in this report that we said if Cox Springs Roads did stuff, you wouldn't have to do anything. But I'd say you're going to be in good shape if you can get those medians in. You're going to be set for a while. So.
Yes.
Still
They're gonna have one crossing, they'll still have to use their horns, yeah. That's.
Do we get many citizen comments on the noise of the trains?
We do.
Yeah.
And there's been one comment where an individual has PTSD. I just wanted to know they saw an article in the paper when this was early on and wanted to know if we were doing anything about that. I know that it's affecting some small children as well. They wake up every time they hear a train. So I mean, it's not a great number of people that are complaining about it, but still, I mean, if we can lessen the noise as they're going through town, then I think that's a win-win for us.
So the other thing, and maybe you guys have talked about this already, but you know, that table we showed with the cost estimates on there, like the recommended option A, ballpark construction cost, 630,000. So that includes that Dubuque County crossing. And maybe we kind of can see it on here. Now I'm looking at it a little bit closer, but you know, that Piasta Street crossing, it's pretty cheap. So I mean, if Dubuque County doesn't want to go do anything at Cox Springs, I mean, you could always add that one on in the future too, if you decided to, but this would be a pretty easy project to go after and just use local funds as well, if you wanted to.
And I would say, just to put it in perspective, if you were just to say, we're not gonna worry about the grant, we're just gonna play for local funds for our Piasta Street right now. You put that in, let's say if you were able to get bid plans out, because that's a pretty simple project this spring, you get it built by the middle of summer. You know, with all that in mind, we could start that paperwork, and by the end of this fall, theoretically, you could have a quiet zone at that location. So as far as this location goes, there's not a whole lot of, you know, private impact, things like that. So it's pretty flexible for you, but out of all the crossings in the area we're looking at, I think Piasta's quiet zone just within Piasta Street is one of those that's probably could be implemented the quickest out of all of them. So.
But in my opinion, it doesn't hurt to go after the grant and just package it as one quiet zone with Cox Springs Road. See if you get the money. If you don't, you can always use local money for Piasta Street. And at least get that implemented as a quiet zone. And then always add on Cox Springs Road in the future.
Was that Cox Springs crossing completely county jurisdiction, or do we have some percentage responsibility?
No, it's completely Dubuque County.
County. Is the property north of there inside our city limits?
The quarry is,
The quarry is, but then it comes back
correct.
inside the tracks. I guess when we planned the trails, we planned, you know, Kelly Oaks, and then wasn't there gonna be a trail either coming out of Kelly Oaks or along the south side of the track going to the west?
Side west, we
I
were,
don't know if it'll be down at the track.
Okay.
We're staying up in Kelly Oaks.
Higher by Kelly Oaks.
Kelly Oaks Park and then up and out and to the south.
You aren't gonna have a risk of a trail or something,
At this
going
point,
across the tracks to the north and doing something there.
Stacy, any thoughts on that?
Not at this point. I
Okay.
mean, as we grow, obviously anything.
Yeah, if,
I don't want
if
to say
if
no,
we get to
but
there, but yeah, but that whole thing would have to be.
Not in our current concept. Yep, that's what I thought.
There we go.
All right. Any other questions for the gentleman here
For Chandra.
or for John? Well, I was including him. Gentlemen?
Yes.
I thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your time tonight. Thanks for putting this together quickly for us.
Yeah, thank you guys. We appreciate it.
No problem.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chandra.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, discussion at this time, or just kind of informative?
Even at 60 grand, I'm trying to figure out how that rates in our overall priorities of the things that we want to invest in. That's why I asked the question about if we're getting, I mean, it seems like a really nice thing to have, but
like low.
can we even put in a median for 60,000?
I can't imagine, no way. We're gonna have
60
to buy
feet
some
on both
property,
sides and a
aren't
3 foot.
I don't think you'll have to buy property. I mean, they're only talking, what was it,
we? 3 feet?
3 feet?
3 feet? So you
It
got,
should be in the right of way.
60
The
feet
length is not
on
gonna
both
make any
sides,
difference.
unless there's a commercial entrance.
so
I just meant
60
like
towards
pushing
the track side and then 100 the other way.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
That's gotta take it to close to the,
Close to the
There's turn
corner.
lane. I mean, that'll
right.
go past.
No, yeah. No, not the turn lane. We can't take out the turn lane.
I'm out.
So I guess guess is there's,
If we're gonna
I don't know how much
in the
study they did to come up with their 60,000. Probably some more engineering study in there to really know what it
This
is.
whole
My guess
process has
is,
been going on since last April.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're very well versed in doing this. They've done it in multiple states. So I have full faith
They
in
seem to
them
think
for
our-
estimations.
our crossing's a low, an easy one to do, but slam dunk. Money.
I think the question now is, if we're gonna proceed and participate in the grant
In the
part,
group grant.
is what we need to let them know. And, that comes obviously at a cost, probably, that's probably gonna be higher than the 1248, so I would just venture to guess 2,500 to 5,000 by the time they
Yeah, who's
vet everything
who's
out.
in and who's out.
Who's in, and Dubuque goes from 11 down to 4 crossings that they want for the quiet zone, so they don't have to pay any money either. All of a sudden, we're paying for half the damn study or the damn grant.
And then that was my question is like, depending on who's in, like, and you get a grant, how much can we potentially get? You can end up spending as much on the study as we actually get back toward our project.
Can we tell them, does everybody find it as a good thing to do or no? To have the quiet zone?
I never thought about it. I don't think it's at the top of my list.
It's not at the top of the list, but we're gonna be in a year coming up here where we're gonna be tied to very small things that we can do as a council for the city.
And for a while, yeah.
For 5 years.
So, I look at it, and again, can we take on some small things, even though they weren't part of our vision? And put them out there that, hey, this is something that does assist a portion of the community, if not a large portion. And to Brian's point, or to Justin's point, that we're still gonna have, having them blow the whistle at Cox Springs, so, but it cuts it in half the number. I don't know if that helps or doesn't help. I know down at Cox Springs, it kind of echoes out of the valley there, I think is part of it. It just kind of funnels right up. So that's probably actually the worst of the two.
And that's birds. That's not Piasta. Up above there, Cox.
Well, but there's houses behind Seton that are right along Cox Springs.
They'll make the argument that they built the house knowing the grove was there.
I fully understand that argument as
People know
well.
when they buy a house or they build one.
Yeah, I understand that argument as well. And again, we're not gonna be, I don't foresee outside of the county stepping up and saying they're gonna fix
They
or,
have no money.
yeah, they have no money, they have, no options to that crossing's never going to be improved. It's gonna be a low priority for them, so.
So is this something if we, obviously the grant money goes away, but if this is something we decide that we want to do 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road?
I think we could do it on our own. I think the reason we're being asked to pull in is because they want it to look like every city in this area wants to have this one big quiet zone thing done, and the more they have, the better it looks for the grant itself.
Easier.
Whether
with
that's good
grant
for
with-
Piasta or just good for, let's say, Dubuque.
Mhm.
So I think this is something that is very good for Dubuque, but in order to help the grant being written, it looks good to have East Dubuque, because if it's in the Telegraph yesterday, this is kind of why I came to a forefront today, because Annette and I had a discussion. And she reached out to these guys to do this presentation, but I think it is, they're looking at it from the more the merrier.
Yeah, you get a better chance.
It's a
at the
better
grant.
chance of getting at the grant money. Now, again, to your question, John, at the end, do we get the grant money? Do we get if they look at it and say, well, your project, if you're only gonna do medium, let's just use their $60,000, you're gonna get $20,000 for it. And we've already spent 5,000 to get the grant written or whatever. And, is 40,000 enough, that we would still have to put out, or would it just
Still
been
wanna do
easier
it.
to do it 2 years down the line when maybe there is money towards it? And again, Annette, your estimate, Annette, on the number of people, less than 5, less than 10?
I'd say less than 10.
Less than 10? Yeah, the greater effect on the community isn't going to be huge. And you guys live over in Royal Oaks, do you
We were
pay
just
attention
talking
here?
about that.
I mean, I hear them, but I don't think they,
Yeah, you're
every night about
you're in a place
something.
called Trackside.
I know. I know, well, we can't get rid of the train. I don't think I even
Don't
notice
move
them
tracks.
anymore. I really don't.
I-
But I think you just, but also I've lived here since I was, a kid, but.
You know, as I look at the things that we sat in that
You
room
hear,
and we had a goal setting,
you're probably. the
this
closest.
wasn't.
It wasn't even,
This
I hear
wasn't
my windows
thought of.
this isn't even, yeah.
It doesn't wake me up.
Oh, because it's coming behind.
Can we say like a
Behind
max,
me is
like
just
can we
like
say
bare, so just it bounces off of the
we're comfortable with
hillsides.
spending
I just don't know. if I feel comfortable
$3,000 on
spending-
the grant?
I don't know if I feel comfortable spending any of it because we're gonna be coming into budget season here and we're gonna be having to make some very difficult choices.
Yep.
And telling department heads that, no, you can't buy that vacuum cleaner. I mean, no, you know what
Why
I'm
do you
saying?
you, Stacy?
You know what I'm saying?
I'm the only one here.
Vacuum cleaners. that-
But my point is that this isn't something that we're all, one of, none of us is jumping up and saying, we got
No.
to-
Well, and to your point, the
Wasn't-
goal setting that we just completed in July, there's a lot of things on there that we're gonna
There's
have to.
a lot of things on
reevaluate.
there and this wasn't even on the radar as a huge community need.
I mean, it would be a nicety.
It's a nice city.
Super nice.
Yeah, that's a good word. It's a
So-
nicety.
Something to look at someday when we have more money laying around.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is just let them know,
Laying around.
Good Lord, later.
With the rate
Yeah, it makes sense.
consolidation,
I'm
that'll be like
comfortable.
never, so.
so what I'm hearing is that I'll let them know we're not moving forward.
I think that's, yeah, unless somebody can come up with an argument and later just changes their minds and thinks, you know.
No one's jumping up
Not
and
right
down
now.
here. No one's jumping up. and
No,
down.
actually, no.
Not right now.
All right.
You do
In the
it.
meantime, we'll get you earplugs in
Thank you. I can't see him, that's well not here.
Consider it white noise.
it. Your house.
We resurface.
We can do whatever we want.
Right, but can we put that median in on the north side when we redo the road?
We have to probably work with the railroad at that point.
Why?
I don't think so.
Because it goes.
I mean, I know the railroad-
I think as long as we meet the way I heard this presentation, as long as we meet the standard, and we can look that up, I mean, we can figure out what that is.
We could.
I don't think it has to, because it's not going up into the track.
I'm not saying we have to go into like a 28E agreement with. We have to let them know that we want to make these improvements. And then we
We-
still have to, and once we make the improvements, then they have to, make it a quiet zone.
But I think what we're asking is, the question right now is, when we do the
Just do the
road,
median.
that side of the road, can we put the median at that point and get half of it done?
We
Still
could.
can't be a quiet zone, but at least as long as we're doing that, hey, if we'd have done this, if we'd have decided this,
Yeah.
6 months ago.
A year ago. we may have thought to put it together when we did
Too
the
little, too
turn lane.
late.
Would have cost
Either way,
What do you do?
didn't do that, so we can't go back.
Yep.
But as long as we're gonna do some road work on that side,
Then do that part of it.
is that
Incorporated into
something to
that.
just,
Yeah, I think that's something that I can work with Russell Weber,
okay, yep,
the county, and
Yep.
see if we can do that.
let's look
What's
at
our
that.
portion of that?
Portion of the cost.
It was small, like
Yeah,
20% or
It was
something.
like, gosh, 50,000 out of it was 250,000 for the overall project. So our portion is 50,000.
Like 20%. So,
Off the top of my head, that
contractors
sounds about
there.
right.
Yeah.
huh?
So I can have.
See, now's the
them-
time to do it.
Yeah.
If we incremental cost add to
So I don't
design
know if
it
that's
into
something
that
that
project.
Russell, I don't think he would do it. I think it would have to go back to like V&K or,
Yeah, they'd have to take their.
It's a conversation to have though.
Yeah,
I agree.
I like that, that's a good
yeah, I can
idea.
have one with Steve and Russell,
That's
just
a
to
good
kind of
idea.
bounce it off of them.
Yeah, okay, great, Stacy, we'll go ahead and jump to you. You wanna, just with, when that golf simulator is gonna be operational?
We're all ready to.
I was gonna say, I don't have a big update. I think with everything with the holidays and stuff, everything's just been holiday crazy downstairs. But I do have an update on that. So, it is getting delivered to the company who is installing next week. So they're thinking the week of the 15th is when it's gonna be installed, so.
I'll take a tea time, I'll take a tea time on 17th.
I would say,
I think you were being optimistic.
I was gonna say, to be cautiously optimistic, I would say the next week would be the closest time we would open it. My fear is, yes, it's getting installed, let's say the 17th, I don't have that date yet. My fear is us not knowing enough to open it up and say, here you go, and then us be like, I don't wanna be that person that is like, well, I don't know, let's, whatever, I wanna know how to use it.
So you want.
So that we
So like for a week, it's just
Like guinea
council,
pigs.
tea
So,
time,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's,
council, city.
and that's fine, like, I'm
Like
good
break
with
it
that.
in.
I think we call it.
Volunteers tribute. So, yeah, so we, I mean,
Team building.
we definitely definitely plan on doing that to
Okay.
make sure that we
We'll be
know
the
how
guinea
many-
pigs.
Yeah, that's fine. So, I mean, when I know more,
Is this, something similar, I know Brian, like they did have Everett Thunder, or
Yep.
is it completely different?
I wouldn't say completely different. It is a completely different system and it's not they have Foresight. We did not get that brand. Their mechanics are on the floor. I didn't want anything to do with that. So they just have golf. We have sports as well. So while it's similar, it's not the same.
I just thought he might be able to bring us up to speed faster, but.
Yeah, so no, it's not. But so I talked to the guy who is installing for us. He owns a bunch of businesses in Wisconsin, ironically. And I think he's got like 24 simulators at this point. So I was just firing away questions. And my biggest question was, how user friendly is it? Like, that's my biggest fear going. This is, okay, I'm booking hour time slots, 2 hour time slots, you know, can I guarantee someone's here? Like, how easy is it for so-and-so to be able to just jump in and go for it? On top of that, the stuff that it takes for like our staff to make sure that it is working and it is working properly and what it takes for that. So it was great to have someone that has been doing it and has worked out all the nook and crannies and knows it inside and out, to be able to answer those questions. And so I think it'll be fine within a couple days for us to get our front desk on board and us on board. So
Do you guys have the logistics of it?
I don't have it out yet, but yes,
You guys
the last
know.
meeting I have my board, we took it again. That's probably been 3-4 months. We've kind of kept revamping. But yeah, and we're not charging a lot. I think we're gonna charge like $10 an hour or something like that, super cheap. But the thought going in was always it's supposed to be amenity with the idea that we want to cover any costs that are gonna come annually, is the thought going into it. Also putting on there that it is an a beginning cost that we reserve the right to raise.
Is there going to be members only first?
Right.
So we are putting that you have to be a member to reserve it. So John Kraft reserves it. If you want to bring 3 of your brothers that don't live in Piasta, you can, but then they have to pay a day pass. So to reserve it, you have to be a member, yes, as of right now. To start, to see like, is this used, is it not used? If it's not used, yeah, let's open it up. But in the meantime, we're gonna do it.
Are we gonna
Oh.
put something in there that we don't have a repeat of the volleyball? So like you don't have a,
I'm gonna
Golf
give all my
pro
golf
come in there
lessons in
and-
there.
I mean,
oh,
yes and no, like, so we have, I would say no. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the same type of system in terms of, I think the hardest thing with that is there's still not a good answer for that. They're a member and they're reserving it within the restriction of it. We didn't put, it's once a day, you can't do it more than once a day. But to do once every 7 days, yes, technically they could.
Just once a day, 1 hour or whatever time.
Correct, correct.
just for the one person. So
Right.
she does that with,
She does, she uses the system well. She plays the game real well.
And I know we talked to
Yeah, we did.
but at one point in time, we had a personal trainer.
Yep.
See something like that come back, it's good. Now this is gonna happen, I can see people are gonna want all my golf lessons. I can make a ton of money.
I'll sign up.
You don't want golf lessons.
You're
You know what I'm saying?
not solving the problem.
Oh, okay, all right.
All right, well, I think,
I think that'll get a little bit uglier than that.
well, and that's not our
Because
decision.
it's new and it's something. You can't break.
And maybe we
you
look
can't
at
break
it once a
the
week, or maybe we look at it, I mean, that would at least eliminate some of
And maybe,
some of
maybe,
the
maybe,
issues.
say it
maybe it
can't
won't
be
happen,
used
but
for-
I think it should be on our radar that.
You could say it can't be
To
used
dip in the
for,
mud,
100%,
dip in the
yeah.
mud when- if it gets.
Yeah. if it becomes a problem, you can just say it can't be used for commercial purposes.
Not for
Then-
profit.
It's yeah.
We have that already, but
Correct, and that's. the
she comes
I
back
mean,
and says she doesn't get paid for,
It's
which-
our word versus.
everybody knows she does.
Right.
And I think, like, I'm gonna try again, so we've done, she tried doing some things in the racquetball court. Our racquetball heat was broken along with a million other things that just did get fixed today as well, so she did it, it was, I think, 50 degrees for the last few weeks. And so she's like, just can't do it. I was like, I go in, I'm like, 'cause I guess I don't blame you. It is freezing in here. And she's got like portable mats. So I plan on talking to her again, seeing if she can go. I have seen more practices with actual teams versus the one-on-one. I know one-on-one is still happening, but there's been more teams, like she's the coach versus she's the trainer happening as well, which is obviously more what I want. I obviously want teams back there. I want whatever we've done. I mean, we do the pickleball, we have the girls volleyball. I'm trying to do stuff to get as many people back there, I guess, within, I know it's still not perfect. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, but not many
That work
people.
when they do the teams, they're still supposed to be paying a day pass, right, if they're not members?
Yeah, so the new thing we came up with was they could reserve it for 3 months. So they'd have every Monday at 5 PM. We only had, I think, 2 people take advantage of it the first go around from October to December. From January to March, I have just 1 group taking advantage of it, basically saying it's too expensive. Cause I think we did $150 to block that in, and then $5 day passes for anyone that's a non-member. But the kicker is a lot of the people we've been getting, I think I've had 3 phone calls in the last 2 days from coaches wanting to reserve a consistent day, a consistent time, and I run through the prices with them, and they're all, well, we want to become members, but no one else is. You know, they're coming from other areas around, and that's basically what I said. Like, our goal for this is to be for our members, or for our members to utilize, for them to be able to practice team sports. Yes, I'm like, it's not expensive if you have everyone's a member and you just have to pay that one upfront cost. Like, it's expensive when no one's a member, and that's not the purpose. The purpose is
Where it's filled.
as an amenity for our members. So, I don't know. Like I said, not perfect, still a work in progress. Stop this circle.
We do that a lot.
This topic especially.
It's kind of our
I
thing,
know,
it's kind of
I
our
know.
thing.
So we're known for.
I mean, I've talked about this hours and I mean, there's been many conversations about this, and I'd be lying to you if I said we found the perfect answer. We haven't. Like, it's not.
You ever talked to any other directors at any other centers and how they handle it?
100%. I mean, so yeah.
I'm just curious what
at
other
that
people
time,
do.
last
We
year-
can't be alone in this type
Yeah.
The problem is, I don't think there's a lot of facilities like this.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I mean, the Y is different than
A
us.
school.
Correct.
Correct.
Dyersville's different than us.
And that's definitely what I had heard. Like, I talked to Dyersville in depth about many different things. We kind of a lot of stuff off each other. And he's pretty much like hearing both sides said I would do the same thing. Like, if it's, you know, they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. Like, that's what's hard for me, is that when someone's doing it by the rules that are set, it's hard to say you need to stop, like, minus getting paid. I mean, obviously that's the kicker. So I can say that they're not happy with me either. Like, they're super not happy with me within the last few months with just, we never could book the gym. I'm like, you're always in the gym. Like, no, like, because I have this, I have pickleball, I have the girls volleyball when I have it, I have men's volleyball now, I book it off for, you know, birthday parties, I book it off for whatever. And so I've gotten several phone calls being like, why don't you want us here? Why do you want you whatever? I'm like, but what you don't understand is this is coming all around. Like, this isn't just you guys, like, this is me trying to make all these groups happy. Pickleball, not happy over when kids are, you know, not in school because they didn't get there 9 to noon and they were irate the whole week and a half. Like, I mean, it's many groups that are all saying the same thing. And so we just don't have enough gym space, period, to reserve.
You're not getting more.
So I don't doubt that. Unless I win the lottery, I know that.
Supply and demand, price goes up.
Yeah, well, and
That's what happens.
so, but the hard thing is it's free for members, and they're all members.
Yeah.
And so supply and demand is,
But I think,
I don't wanna say moot point, but
That's full.
I think though, I've seen more, that's awful. I've seen different groups back there
Mhm.
versus, it seemed like last couple of years, it was just.
Yeah.
The volleyball just dominating.
Yeah.
But
And I've been trying to, and maybe, like I said, the men's volleyball I could have done. It's hard because there's so many requests, like, I don't know that I should say. But volleyball programs elsewhere are not super popular, and if we did that volleyball program I do for 6 weeks, I could do it throughout the entire winter, every day a week, every weekend, whatever it was. And I could book it because they just hate the programs that are offered, and they love the program that we have here, the way it's set up. And that's my rebuttal, like, I'm just playing the game within tournaments and members and what's right and what's wrong, and I guess trying to find that perfect fit, and it's not a perfect fit, not an easy one to find, if that makes sense. So,
There we go. This is why you're the only one.
yeah, because I keep talking, but yeah, so Golf Simulator, we'll keep an eye on it. If it's something like that does, I guess naively, I'm excited because of how many people are asking, and it's families, it's avid golfers that just want to golf in the winter. Like it hasn't been that, not to say it won't turn into that,